House in Baltimore, one of the Caps series, where I'll be watching the Caps. We'll be in Pittsburgh all next week. 4 days in Pittsburgh. Hopefully that's never happened for this guy. He is our WNST partner on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. And if you need some seats for the aforementioned Caps, you'll want to do that out on SeatGeek, one of his great sponsors. You can follow his journey at Coach Billick out on Twitter, and you will follow him all weekend long as he is in Philadelphia. If you couldn't be bringing in the wedge or coaching anymore, I think you love this draft weekend more than anybody I know. So I wanted to have you on before the draft, Coach, just so you could tell everyone that they should bring their kids and families and wives up to Philadelphia this weekend, right?
Oh, they should, just because of the distance. I mean, it has changed. In the old days, even when it was in New York and Radio City Music Hall, it was a great event, great to go to, hard to get into, but the energy in the city and all the things going on. Well, what they're doing now in the last 2 years in Chicago, it's going to be the same way in Philadelphia. It's darn near a Super Bowl. They have the entire NFL experience there. They have the booze. They have so much going on. It needs to be a bucket list. If you haven't been to a draft, you need to drive up the road to Philly, and it looks like the weather is going to be pretty good. It is worth seeing.
This thing's turned into the Super Bowl for cold weather cities, right? I mean, this is something maybe Baltimore could host, maybe somewhere down the line. Certainly a springtime helps, and they had good weather in Chicago, too. They had great weather 2 years ago in Chicago. But this is going to be the cold weather thing, right? Because Super Bowls are going to Vegas, they're going to L.A. We know what that's. But this thing has turned into that other thing. They'll take this thing up to Boston and make a fortune with it one year, right?
Absolutely. Next year, next couple of years, I think you'll see it in L.A., you'll see it in Dallas. I know Kansas City's trying to get one. It is one they're going to move it around, kind of, to reward fans and franchises around the NFL, those that don't have a chance to get to the draft because of the nature of it. And I'll screw up the number here, but I think there are close to, there's $750,000 or 1 million people, whatever, had gone through the draft experience over the 3 days last year in Chicago. So, yeah, it's accessible. And it's a great event.
All right, so you were always tied to quarterbacks as a coach and as an offensive coordinator. Make a case for any of these guys, because I really do think the Ravens at 16, whether there's 1 or 2 or 3 quarterbacks off the board by the time they come up, or maybe none, I think it's kind of outrageous. But, from the Ravens' perspective, the trade back, which Ozzie has done before, and where these quarterbacks are, none of these guys are considered blue chip. But 4 or 5 general managers are going to stick their neck out for Mitchell Trubisky, for Kaiser, for Mahomes, for Deshaun Watson. What do you make of these quarterbacks? Because I think they're going to really define this draft.
Well, and it seems that way every year. I mean, the Ravens, they would love to see these quarterbacks all come up into the top 10. Because if it does, it means some pretty good players are going to get pushed back to them at 16. And that's what all the teams that are hoping for. If you're not in the market for a quarterback, hope happen. And you're right. When you look at these quarterbacks, and my pat answer has been, sure, they all could be great quarterbacks. There's no reason why any of them shouldn't be good in the NFL. The fact of the matter is that over half of them will probably fail, particularly if you're talking about the first round, simply because that's the numbers. What will be interesting is they represent, I think this is, as hard as it is to evaluate quarterbacks, this could be the hardest I've ever seen, because the top guys, and they seem to be Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Kaiser and Mitchell Trubisky, as you said. Well, Mahomes, Watson, and Kaiser come out of systems that it's very, very hard to extrapolate how they'll do in the NFL. You're kind of guessing, and you're kind of going on just sheer physical ability. And Trubisky is kind of a one-year wonder. Really only had the 1 year at North Carolina. That has been a bit of a hit and miss in the NFL. So choosing these guys is it's not without risk this year.
For the Ravens, back in the season, at the end of the season, when things went sour on Christmas afternoon and curdled my eggnog and, the long January and getting into February in the Combine, all we talked about around here, Coach, was a rush edge, sort of to replace Suggs, Doomerville, maybe waiting on Zadarius Smith or waiting on Matt Judon. But at the cornerback position, without Jimmy Smith, I know they went out in the market and brought in Brandon Carr, but I thought all along those would be the 2 positions that would be potential for the first round. Coach, since these mock drafts come out, they're all about wide receivers and Mike Williams and Corey Davis or O.J. Howard if he falls, or even Ryan Ramczyk or a right tackle, maybe even a running back. I know offense versus defense, you never really had all that much of balance. It was always very defensively heavy when you were the coach here and we had good teams. But when you do have a $25 million quarterback, you got to find somebody from to throw the ball to. I thought that was Perryman, but just because they drafted him 2 years ago doesn't mean that they still believe in him. I would be very nervous if Williams or Davis come off the board for the Ravens, even though I know that, instinctively they need a wide receiver. I know that, but it always scares me off, these first-round wide receivers. Not because Ozzie hasn't been good at it. I don't think anybody's any good at picking first-round wide receivers in this league.
Well, we certainly have had our difficulties in taking receivers, and I was a part of that, obviously, in the first-round busts that we took over the years. The two biggest names, obviously, that could be there, whether it be Mike Williams from Clemson or Corey Davis from Western Michigan, would not be bad picks. I'm not sure either one, based on what you hear and see and some of the people that are talking about it. I'm not sure that they're the huge impact receiver that we've seen sometimes, particularly coming out of the first round. And part of that may lend itself to the fact, well, you can get value because receivers in the NFL coming in from the college game, they're a little like running backs. I can probably pick something up in the second and third or fourth round that could help. So I don't know that I need to expend the 16th pick on that draft, particularly if, a cornerback like Marlon Humphreys should drop down, or you've got the big defensive ends, Derek Barnett and Charles Harris from Tennessee and Missouri, that could be there. That, like I said, if the quarterback should get pushed up into that early first round, you could have some pretty good players get pushed back. That and when it comes to the quarterback, I do a session tomorrow for NFL Network about this very issue. The key is at the quarterback position, it's real simple. Or to use a Marv Levy saying, it's simple but not easy. If you think one of these quarterbacks is a franchise quarterback, you take them. Whether you're Cleveland, whether you're San Francisco, Chicago, the Jets, you take them. If they're not a franchise, you can't take them in the first round, particularly top 15 picks. So really it comes down to, do you think they're a franchise quarterback or not? And I don't care how good Myles Garrett is or Jamal Adams or Marshawn Lattimore. If you think any one of these guys is a franchise quarterback and you're the Cleveland Browns, you can't compare the two. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's take top three picks over the last since 2008. Let's talk about Matt Ryan and what Matt Ryan represents. And let's take Von Miller, maybe a future Hall of Fame player coming off the edge, obviously. And if you knew now, let's say the draft were today, and you knew that what career these two were going to have, who would you take? It'd be Matt Ryan, hands down. Everybody would take the quarterback. So there is no player at any position that trumps taking a quarterback. If you think they're a franchise quarterback, there seems to be a split of opinion as to whether they're that good or not.
Well, there aren't a whole lot of people, I think, that would trade their quarterback right now if they have a quarterback for Mitchell Trubisky or for any of these guys. But, there are 10 teams without quarterbacks. They have to come out of this weekend with something that feels like hope, right? And that's for Cleveland, San Francisco, Chicago, maybe Jacksonville, certainly the Jets, Buffalo's in that category. And then there are the aging guys like the Chargers and the Saints and what their circumstances are going to be. Even the Redskins with Kirk Cousins probably don't feel great about what they've got going on. Not to mention Denver and the Houston Texans, who are still sort of banging around trying to find their answer as well.
Yeah, Cleveland's the interesting one because you could make a case, depending on how they're rated, and you're playing with fire here a little bit, but you could go ahead and take Myles Garrett at number 1, and it's likely that you may have a pick of these guys, depending on what you think, at 12. They also have the 33rd pick of the draft. So they've got 3 picks, the first 33, where, you're rolling the dice, but one of these 3 could very well, and 4, if you throw in Mahomes, could be available at 33. Certainly, you're going to have your pick of them at 12, likely. And so where do you rate these guys?
Well, it's the Browns. They're going to screw it up, right, Coach?
Well, so whatever you do, don't take anybody at 22. That's been their death now. That's where they got Brady Quinn. That's where they got The other kid, just whatever you do,
Johnny,
don't
whatever his
take
name
one
is,
at 22, and you're okay.
Hey, your old pal Ozzie, he's going to have plenty of Alabama guys to pick from at 16, right? They can't all be off the board. I know O.J. Howard has really sort of darted up the board, and I don't know that there's a second place at that position, but it is hard to say who is going to invest a top 10 pick in a tight end, right?
Well, you're looking at potentially 9, maybe 10 guys in the first 3 rounds. That's pretty strong, even for Alabama. And it tells you just how good they are, obviously. But obviously, and O.J. Howard seems to be the cream of the crop. You know, Reuben Foster, everybody's wondering what happens in terms of the diluted drug sample. Marlon Humphreys has dropped down a little bit, but still, he'd be an excellent pick. Marlon Humphreys is sitting there at 16, good corner from Alabama. Boy, that would be awful hard for Ozzie to drop past him.
Well, we always talk about these character issues, and at some point, someone is going to take Joe Mixon. You have injury issues. I mean, heck, we had a kid in the middle of the night on Monday. Story wakes up on Tuesday that the kid from Ohio State had some issues in Cleveland the other night. And Conley, that'll certainly. I don't think we're going to see anybody with a bong mask video this year, but there, all of the reputations and all of this, if you're out to shoot at a kid and you don't like him and you've got something on him, 7 o'clock on draft night, that set a whole new precedent last year, didn't it?
It did, and at least the one thing, and I have a real issue with it, not so much though, I mean, that will be what it will be, but these reporting of failed drug tests or Wonderlic scores, that's a problem for the league, and that's a real problem from the standpoint of the trust that these kids have when they come in, that there's supposed to be a confidentiality, and that's an issue that needs to be addressed. In terms of the other things showing up, you're exactly right. And I always find it's interesting, as we've talked about this many times, Ness, the character seems to be on a sliding scale. A lot of people will jump up in the soapbox and say, well, we covet character and we don't go near character. But are you kidding me? This guy's available in the 3rd round? Oh, we'll take him. So evidently it depends on what the value is. And obviously when I hear a team say, well, we're not interested in this guy in the 1st round, we don't think it's worth the risk. Oh, but taking a guy with bad character is worth a risk in the 3rd or 4th round? Now you balance that with the fact that young people do stupid things. And you got to determine, is this just a stupid mistake by a young person, or is this part of their character that you want to stay away from?
Well, and characters, I think, helped a bunch of these guys get up the board as well. Part of the interviewing process is when a kid who is bright, who has good parents, who's always done his work, who has a nice girlfriend, who has, had Phil Savage on earlier, Coach, he said a clean player. That's the word. He's clean. I would always opt to take that guy, but I'm not running a football team. And as they said, we're not in the business of being a choir boy league either. I've heard that for a number of years, but all these kids will get taken. Someone will take on that risk and hope to get the reward. I mean, hey, look, you talk about wide receivers and the guys that you got wrong. Clearly, you were part of Randy Moss in the beginning in Minnesota, and there were a bunch of teams that just ran away from him, and he ran all the way to the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah, and we can't dismiss the fact that giving young people an opportunity to show that they can be good citizens and be good team members. And there's nothing better than a redemption story and getting a second chance. So, and then the ones with the failed drug test, that's the one that's interesting because, we got a couple places in this country where smoking dope's legal. So all of a sudden now that's something that you're going to drop a player on. You're going to be concerned about it. But because it is illegal in the NFL, and that's something these kids have got to understand. The young men that have trouble, I have trouble with the ones that come into the combine and test positive because that's just an intelligence test. That's just telling me you're too stupid to play for me.
For you, any particular favorite players, Coach? I mean, a couple guys you've put on and said, I like this kid in the 2nd or 3rd round. And I know you're doing a lot of the later coverage in this draft, so I know you've had to take even a deeper dive than a lot of other analysts. But give me a couple kids that are going to happen late in the 1st day, 2nd day, whatever, that aren't the top 10 guys that we're all very familiar with because of the mock drafts.
Well, the 2nd, 3rd round are key rounds, and it's where you have a chance maybe to pick up some real value, guys that maybe can come in and start or have a role for you, particularly at positions like running back, wide receiver, maybe that slot nickel, to where the pressure's the 1st round. You can find a specific role for them. this Jabril Peppers from Michigan, everybody's talking about. Now, again, there's supposedly a little bit of an issue with him off the field that has to be cleaned up. But this is a young man that they call him a Swiss Army knife because he can just do so many different things. He seems to be a player that everybody's going to be interested in seeing just where he ends up and what the potential is for him going forward. I think the wide receivers that could be available in the second round, let's say that Baltimore decides to go that other goes with the safety or goes with the corner or the rush defensive end with the 16th pick. Now they come back around, and you could have a wide receiver like John Ross from Washington, a good wide receiver that you could maybe get in that second round. There's Zach Jones from East Carolina, which a lot of people, that would be right in that level at 47 where the Baltimore Ravens are picking. Or maybe this Kis Schuster from USC. He's a very interesting player. When was the last time you saw USC have a player? They've struggled. It's amazing to me see how few USC players are actually in the draft. I mean, they always used to be the staple. You talk about, what did we say, 10, 11 players from Alabama possibly being in the first 10 picks. And for USC, there's one kid that Adoree Jackson is a pretty good cornerback, but otherwise you're not talking until the second or third round. So it's interesting. You can kind of look at the draft to see where the power is in the college football as well. So, yeah, there's going to be any number of players in that second and third round that the Baltimore Ravens will have. Ozzie, Ozzie, he's going to covet what's going to be there. And if they can't get the player they want at 16, you hear Phil Savage talk about a clean player. Basically, you're talking about your blue chip round. How deep is the blue chip? I wouldn't rule out, because of the nature, say, of the receiver position or DB and the value later on, if they want to fall back and pick up another pick, which would give them, again, get another second. Because, the Ravens, in the long time we talked about, obviously it's a good team and where they're going to play. The Ravens have a lot of needs. And they got to get bodies. And the more in the first, second, third round, the better. And so, you're looking at, even in that third round, a kid like Malika Dupree from LSU could be there. You're looking at an offensive tackle. The young man from Texas A&M really hasn't played much. I'm going to mispronounce the name, but it's Elamunor. Is an interesting, prospect, raw. This kid, Joe Mixon. You never know. The kid from Oklahoma who is, going to be the best back in the NFL because of the domestic violence. Now, it's hard for me to imagine the Baltimore Ravens could go there with the young man and the issue that he had with his girlfriend. But there's going to be values in that third round that people are going to covet.
Coach, the league likes to present this as one big reality show, right? And it certainly is. From the bong gas mask video last year, creating some havoc on draft night, I think the havoc on Thursday night will be trades. I think there'll be a lot of trades. It just feels to me like a lot of teams in the top 10 want to move down. A lot of teams need a quarterback. It sort of moves things along. To your point, teams like the Ravens will be happy to back up and take your second or third round pick to get some more firepower. And then teams like the Patriots that don't even have picks but have a quarterback. I think that the Garoppolo thing's still a wild card, as well as Marvin with McCarron as well. I just expect a bunch of trades. I don't expect anything to stay chalk for what, the Buccaneers picking at 19 or the Broncos picking at 20. I think this thing's going to look like a jigsaw puzzle by halfway through the night Thursday.
Well, remember, that's happened 2 years ago. I mean, it was right from Jump Street. It was bouncing around and couldn't keep up with my sheets as to who traded what and picked up for what and where do they go. You could be right, particularly with those quarterbacks, because if they don't go early, there could be a number of them that are going to hang around in that late first round, and there could be people that want to move up. Remember, Cleveland, San Francisco, Chicago, they start the day on day two, where you typically, okay, I'm going to wait and pick up my quarterback then because these guys got pushed back. Well, you may have to move up into one of these teams because obviously 20 through 32 typically don't need a quarterback. And particularly where the draft is, their ability and willingness to drop back so you can jump up and get back into that first round to maybe get ahead of the curve and take one of these young quarterbacks. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think we could see a lot of movement, particularly in the latter part of the first round where people want to move up.
Coach, we're supposed to get some decent weather in Philadelphia this weekend, from what I understand, and I know 250,000 people are going to be coming through up there. Everybody's an hour and a half away from going up to Coach Billick's favorite event, the NFL Draft in Philadelphia all weekend. Hey, so stay warm up there, relax, hydrate yourself. It's going to be a long weekend. We will be watching on our mobile devices, our iPads, everywhere, and monitoring all things draft. I know you love this part of the year, and we'll get back in a couple of weeks and catch up on what you think of all of it.
Sounds great.
You got it. He is Coach Billick, out on Twitter, as well as our head coach here on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation, and still a partner at SeatGeek as well. You can go out there and buy your Caps tickets or your concert tickets all summer long at SeatGeek.com. And don't forget, Living Classrooms Foundation has their Maritime Magic event moved into early October this year. You can go to livingclassrooms.org and learn more about all the incredible stuff that they do for education here in Baltimore on behalf of Coach Billick. We appreciate his time. You can watch him all weekend on the NFL Network. I know all of us will be watching hockey, basketball, baseball, the NFL Draft, one of the busiest weeks of our year here. Anything you miss here, you can find in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. You can listen to us from your mobile device when you want, where you want, how you want. It is the WNST text service. Last but never least, our trips are on sale. Nashville, Green Bay, London, Minneapolis, all on sale now at WNST.net. You can throw me an email, nasty@WNST.net. It's under the Road Trips tab. And I'm out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Also, $100 off this week if you want to go on our road trips. So act now. That offer goes away next Saturday. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.